Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, opinions, and trends from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and this evening I'm joined by Michael Cannon from Represent Us. We're going to be talking a little bit about reducing corruption, at least modifying the way that money gets into politics and giving control back to the people. Michael, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Chris.
And so, we ran into each other at a very interesting place. I mean, we've run into each other before in tech circles and everything else, but we recently met, and it'll surprise many viewers of the show, but I was speaking at a MoveOn.org event. Bringing up the Tea Party perspective of some issues that they were addressing. But you were there as well, not as a regular MoveOn.org member, but to increase awareness about Represent Us and about corruption that's occurring.
Big money.
Yeah, big money and how it affects politics. And if I say move on and corruption and big money, the audience already thinks we know where we're going to go, right? But you've got a different spin on things. And one of the things that's very interesting, as we've had a chance to talk a little bit in preparing for the show, is that this is a universal concern for people. This corruption and the way that power is traded for money. First of all, how'd you get involved in this movement?
Yeah, I have a 4- and a 6-year-old kid, and I was sort of realizing how much effort and money and time and work I was spending to raise these kids at one level. And another level, during the last election cycle, I was listening to some rhetoric from some of the candidates talking about abolishing the EPA and global warming's a hoax. And I had been reading some books, some science books from Jim Hansen from NASA as an example around the science behind global warming, and was like, I was like, the science is pretty solid on this, yet there's all these sound bites saying that it's bull. Why? Why are they saying this? And this little voice whispered, follow the money. And then I ended up reading a book called Republic Lost, How Money Controls Congress and a Plan to Stop It. And it painted the picture of follow the money in a blatantly obvious way. And I realized that my kids potentially might not have a world to live in, or their kids anyhow, if we don't stop this. And we've got to actually get the money out of our political system before we can have sane energy policy. And so I'm not really working on the issue that I care most about, but it's kind of the root cause, right? If we get the money out of our system, then all the issues that we care about, I think we can get addressed, because the funders will be out of the equation to a large extent, and then we can, as citizens, can determine what's really most important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those things that the left-right paradigm would jump right in if it were specifically about, global warming and that kind of thing. Like
absolutely.
And the same hackles rise on the opposite side when people say, I can't believe they believe in this kind of stuff.
Yeah, but you could bring it up around size of government debt, right? Crony capitalism, all of these things you can track back to the same root cause. So that's the one thing that you were mentioning earlier that we all share. The stats we were talking about is like 98% of Republicans, 97% of Democrats support anti-corruption legislation if it was there. I mean, this is real. People see it every day.
Yeah, and so help us frame the discussion around your definition of corruption. Is it overt? Is it covert?
Yeah,
Talk to us about that.
I mean, I think when we usually think about corruption, we think about the Rod Blagojevich type of corruption. Give me $50K for your Senate seat, bags of money, kind of very explicit. Here's how much it's going to cost you for you to get this legislation. Right. And I'm sure that occurs, but I don't think it's the big issue, right? I think underneath that, there are really two types of corruption. I would call one a sort of gift-based bribery, and the other one just pure extortion. And so what I mean by gift-based bribery is you have big money, which I would say is unions, corporations, and the wealthiest 0.01%, literally a couple hundred people, right? Give 70% of all the funding that goes into our campaigns. Right. So they provide this in terms of campaign support, right, to lobbyists and to PACs and super PACs. All this money pours in. Right. And they put that money in there for a reason, right? So they give these gifts. Yeah. Surprise, surprise. So the gifts go in, and then the next day or the next week or the next month, the door knocks and says, I need your help with this. Right? I need your help. So for example, one of the popular things I've seen recently, right, is that the NFL pays no taxes. They spend a lot of money on lobbyists, right, to get a couple words inserted in a code that basically said, and football leagues are excluded from paying taxes. Right. Brilliant. If you got the money.
A few million a word?
Yeah,
and football
right.
league.
Yeah, so they spend a
there.
couple million lobbying, and they got hundreds of millions of dollars back. You know, it's a great example of crony capitalism at its best.
And General Electric, same thing, billions of dollars in profit, and
Right.
tax bill that's shaped like an egg.
Yeah, so that's the gift kind of stuff that's going on. It's just, you know, it's wink, wink, nod, nod. I'll take care of you, you take care of me kind of stuff. And then there's another kind of corruption, which I would just say is just sort of blatant extortion, right? So, and I read a book recently about this. It really brought this to light. And so, you know, you can have simple versions of it. So, you know, one of the terms they use is a milker bill. So our Congress will come up with a bill that wasn't designed to pass.
Right.
But it was designed to hurt some particular group, right, of wealthy people.
Yep.
Right. And then they get it to a certain point and then start calling around and collecting donations to make it go away.
Yeah.
Right. So that was, you know, sort of one example. Right. Another example, they call it a toll booth. Right. So there's this piece of legislation going through Congress, and all of a sudden it stops magically. There's some procedural problem.
Yeah.
And guess what happens after that? The phones start ringing. We need some help. We need a little extra funds to get this thing to get through.
Yeah.
Just, you know, very blatant extortion going on.
And do they label that as a marketing expense that's necessary for it, or do they even tell you what the money is needed for?
No, they just say, you know, we just need a little extra money to help. You know, it's just, you know, it's everybody knows what's going on, and you know, the wealthy individuals and corporations and unions and people, they feel extorted. They feel like they have to do this in order to get stuff, right? Right. And then there's double milker bills, right? So and a great example here in Silicon Valley, right, was SOPA, right? That happened a couple of years ago. So it pitted, you know, the Hollywood entertainment industry against the Silicon Valley technology industry, right? And now you've got arms war. You've got millions and millions of dollars flowing in both directions fighting this stuff out. And who's the winner?
The politicians.
Yeah, they just raked in the dough.
Like magic.
Yeah.
And so the question would be, you're talking about wanting this to stop, but technically there are laws in place to prohibit people from giving a lot of funds. I know that changed recently where you've got the super PACs and that kind of thing. But generally, an individual, and you talked about the wealthiest 0.01%, being able to give funds, depending on the level of campaign, they might be locked up at $3,000 or $2,500 or whatever it is for an individual candidate. But there are ways that things are set up so they can skirt the money around and throw it through other organizations and everything else. When you're talking about reforming the system, what kind of steps are you talking about taking to take the money out? Because obviously, politicians aren't going to cut off their own food bowl.
Right. Oh, yeah.
What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's like we want to go to our Congress and say, can you put a lock on your bank so you can't take any money out?
Yeah, I'd prefer not to take any more money from you. I keep having to buy wheelbarrows and all of these things to take. It's just messy for me. Can you just stop giving me money? I don't see that happening. What are you kind of thinking about?
You know, I spent a number of years, you know, literally, you know, my kids know that I have a Make the Better World night, and I sit aside at my desk and I study these things, right, trying to figure out what I can do to make a better world for them. Right. And you know, I realized after studying this for a while, there are really two solutions to this big money corruption problem. And sort of one, I think, has got a lot of press lately, right, is the Citizens United ruling that allowed for unlimited independent expenditures, right? So you can have Tom Strayer or on the conservative side, right, or you can have Sheldon Adelson or the Koch brothers on the right side. They can spend as much money as they want. They can put it into the PACs, and it's all hidden, and it's great for them. Right, and so that's been popular now. So one of the solutions is to actually is to have an amendment to the Constitution, right, that allows us to regulate independent expenditures. Right, and there are a number of good groups that are sort of working on that. Some of those groups also would like to have statements like corporations are not people, money isn't free speech, you know, those kind of things. Right. That's kind of all on that bandwagon.
But would you advocate in that particular case, because my understanding of Citizens United is it put people more on an even footing with things that unions could already do, like behind the scenes and everything else. Would you apply that kind of thinking across the board? So not only are corporations not people, but unions aren't people.
Absolutely. Unions are corporations.
Well, but some people don't look at it that way.
But they
just
are,
look at
legally.
Well, legally, I agree. They are. But
and therefore it would apply.
Yeah, but a lot of rhetoric is out there, and people think, oh no, the unions need to be protected from freedom of speech limitations, but individuals don't. I just wanted your personal take on that.
Oh, it's got to be everybody.
Yeah.
So the big three money buckets, right, are unions, corporations, and we've got to we got to say, you know, hey, this isn't your, you know.
Right.
Yep.
So, okay,
when
so
money talks and people are silenced, something's wrong.
okay, so taking it past that, and sorry to interrupt, I just wanted to clarify. So
step one is this, or one of the solutions is the amendment path. And if you look at the total amount of money going into our campaigns this year, this time around, it probably represents maybe 20% of the problem. So this corruption problem existed long before Citizens United. It was all of the Citizens United did was put a turbocharger on the corruption engine. So the next piece then is what can we do legislatively, right? Because getting an amendment is tough. I mean, the Equal Rights Amendment still isn't passed, right? And that was pretty much a no-brainer. That's what attracted me to the Represent Us and the American Anti-Corruption Act. And what I liked about it was it had a really great comprehensive plan. So and it also had a great plan to pass. And I thought it was a very unifying message, meaning we all agree that corruption is a problem. It brings us together. It's not a left-right issue. It's a right-wrong issue.
Right.
And so under the legislation, there are a couple of there's 11 different points, and so one of them is...
I won't ask for all of them, but so what are the top three?
Yeah, the top 2 or 3. So, one of them is stop the bribery. Wow, what a concept. So, and there's 3 or 4 different items in there. One of them says, hey, you can't take money from the people you regulate. Holy, this is not legal. It's legal now?
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, it is. So, simple things just like that can make a big difference.
Yeah.
Right? Another sort of bucket is people over PACs. And there's a couple of different items in there. One that in particular I like is that every taxpayer gets a $100 tax rebate voucher that then they can spend on any political candidate that they would like to spend it on, or PAC, or whatever they want to fund it on. So you get your money back to provide it, and that will sort of level the playing field with the big money, right? So if you've got big money still playing, now we've got citizen money also playing, and it allows, it doesn't allow one to drown out the other as easily.
Where does that money come from, though? The $100?
Well, it's our taxpayers, the tax that we've paid, right? So it comes from the taxpayers as a rebate.
So it's a taxpayer rebate.
Right.
Yeah,
it's a taxpayer rebate.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Most of the ideas that are out there right now are more like matching funds, and there's a bunch of problems. People not wanting their money being spent on issues or candidates they don't want to, right? So the tax rebate is I think is a politically neutral place to put it. Okay.
Yeah. So not everyone has to have the $100, and the $100 isn't allocated, but if they put $100 towards somebody, they can write it off, basically.
Right. You actually get my understanding, it's a voucher. So I haven't heard all the details of how it gets implemented, but you get a voucher for $100, right? That then I'm assuming electronically you can distribute however you want. Okay. But it's your money. You can distribute it or not distribute it. Okay. Right. Yeah. So I really like that one. And another area is, with a couple of different provisions is, end the secret money. Right. So so disclosure, right? Being able to track all the way back to exactly who was providing the money for this particular candidate, campaign, ad, whatever, right?
Yeah. I would love to see, that even when legislation is written, that whoever wrote the bill has to have their name next to that section or subsection. So let's say a lobbyist wrote it on behalf of a congressional appointee or whatever. I mean, they would have to be mentioned. Okay, written by Greenpeace, written by the coal industry, written by whoever, so that you could trace it back, and you could also check the donations.
I think it helps us as citizens make better decisions.
Yeah.
Right? If we know who's promoting this, then we have some sort of sense of, and if those people don't want to let people know, then that tells you something's fishy, right? If they don't want to be exposed, then there's some game going on. If they're doing okay, then having your name associated would be perfectly fine.
Well, these kinds of things also would expose the electeds for the jobs they're not doing.
Yes.
But that's a whole other side story. So so those are some of the particular pieces of the legislation that you were particularly impressed by.
And the last one is enforce the rules, right? So the FEC right now is kind of toothless, right? So there's some things we got to do to make sure that they have the ability to actually sniff out and punish corruption when they find it.
Well, what's interesting about the FEC is I've had to deal with them directly because I had to fill out paperwork. Well, what's interesting is that I called up the office and I talked to a nice lady who I made a joke. I said, hey, I just want to make sure that my paperwork's filled out correctly because I don't want to be sitting next to Charlie Rangel in jail. Mm-hmm. And she says, I take offense to that statement. Charlie Rangel is a good man. And this is after he forgot to disclose all of his properties in various places and everything else, where he should be prosecuted. But at the same time, she says, oh, he's a good man. I resent you calling him corrupt.
Yeah.
Well, I resent you being resentful.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
so
exactly.
and that's
Yeah.
where even the FEC, like you said, not only is it toothless, it defends the criminals.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, we need some work there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Trevor Potter is one of the authors of the American Anti-Corruption Act. He used to be a chairman of the FEC, so he's got it pretty well dialed in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and we need that, people who are actually willing, like you said, there shouldn't be a requirement to enforce the rules. That should be what the rules are there for, is the expectation that they will indeed be enforced. So what kinds of steps is Represent Us taking in order to push this forward, get people involved, and actually get the food trough cut off by the politicians themselves?
So I mean, you know, one thing is we talked about was, you know, writing the legislation. So step one is writing the legislation, and we figured that our Congress is not going to write this in a way that has no loopholes and changes much. So if we're going to do this, we got to do it ourselves. So
you guys have to pay them to do it. That's the step. You got to pay them to move the legislation forward.
Gosh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and then it'll be okay.
So Trevor Potter, Larry Lessig, and a whole group of constitutional scholars got together and said, all right, what can we do legislatively, like we just talked about, that would work? So that's step one. And let's make sure it passes constitutional muster, and let's figure out what the lobbyists would do to work around it. So we got Jack Ambroff, right, to play, you know, devil's advocate, to be able to say, oh, well, if you did that, then here's how it'd work around it. If you did that, here's how it'd work around it. So we tested it.
You need somebody who's going to try to break it.
Yeah, absolutely. We got our tester. Right. So step one is write it. So now it's written. The next step is to get 1 million citizens to become co-sponsors.
Right.
So that's where you and I and all of our watchers come in. Is go to the Represent Us website and sign up as a co-sponsor, because we need at least 1 million to start.
Right.
And then the next step after that, step three, then is to go to our Congress people and ask them to support and introduce the legislation. And if they're willing to do that, great. And if they're not willing to do that, then we have to organize collectively in our districts and vote those people out of office and vote in somebody who will support this legislation.
Right.
When we get enough of our Congress people to the point where we have a majority that would pass this, then we'll introduce it to Congress, and we'll have a new anti-corruption legislation that will solve, I'd say, about 75–80% of our big money corruption problem.
So the question is, are you just looking at this at a national level, or are you trying to attack it at the state level at all? And would it fly at the state level, or is it completely different?
So phase one is when right now is the national level. There is a vision to implement it at the state level, right, and at the city and county and city level as well. And so I think probably in the next maybe 3 to 6 months, you're going to see an announcement around a state-based Anti-Corruption Act that's largely framed from the American Anti-Corruption Act, but tuned to one particular state who's recently had a big loss and realizes that it's going to take more than please, pretty please, can you fix this problem for us?
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking, you know, New Jersey, California, Illinois. There are lots of states who might benefit from such legislation.
Yeah.
And that's the training ground for the politicians that we throw into Washington in many cases too.
Absolutely.
But I would just also think that it's an easier chunk to take off if we were to do things at a state level. And there are so many examples of reasons why these things should be in place to stop the corruption. I'm sure you should have no problem getting citizens involved. So what kind of national organization is involved? What kind of infrastructure is there? Or do people just go to the Represent Us? Is it .com?
Represent.us. It is
Represent.us.
Yeah,
okay.
it's kind of a clever, right? It's
I thought it might be the case.
Yeah.
So people go there, and then do they get set up with a local state administrator or on county level? How does that all work?
Yeah, so we're building out 435 district grassroots organizations, one for every congressional district.
Okay.
So when you sign up as a citizen co-sponsor, you'll get an option to volunteer for different ways.
Right.
And then somebody from the national group will contact you, connect you with your local district team.
Right.
And you can be off and running, making the world a better place.
And so it's a nonpartisan group, but are you seeing any leanings, or are there any internal skirmishes that break out? I've just seen in coalition building in the past, people, even if they're going in the same direction, they don't want to do it together. Right. Are you guys seeing that there, or are people playing nicely together?
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, coastal California just tends to be so much more democratic and liberal. So, you know, the people that I'm around, I tend to see more of that there. So I think that's by nature where we are. You know, when you look at the national polls, I mean, it's 1 point difference between Democrats and Republicans around supporting anti-corruption legislation.
Right.
So whenever I do get a chance to talk to somebody that's on the conservative side, and they learn about this, they're like, yeah, I'm against crony capitalism. Yeah, I'm against, you know, all of this bribery that just makes our government debt go up and up and up. I'm against all this extortion that just creates bigger and bigger government because they can, the more they regulate, the more money they can extort. And I mean, we share all of this in common. So, so there's no reason why it can't be, you know, a left, you know, a joint, nonpartisan.
So you're looking for people to come on as sponsors. It sounds like you might need people to go out and advocate at the district level. What kinds of volunteers are you looking for?
Yeah, so we've got a group of people who are going out and meeting with different interest groups. So like Rotary groups, Lions groups, Kiwanis clubs, right? All our civic organizations going out and making presentations to these organizations, letting them know about the American Anti-Corruption Act. Not necessarily that they would be a sponsor of it as a club, but that they feel like they should at least let their citizens know, right? So that's one piece. There's another group of team that's actually out calling on all the different political clubs, Republican clubs, Democratic clubs, progressive clubs, all these different clubs, with the idea of making presentations there to let them know that we all have this one thing in common that is really the barrier to most of the things, the issues we care about, really. And building that up. Then there's another organization that's built up around community outreach. So going to farmers markets, parades, you know, local events. There's lots of things to do. There's online activism to do in terms of posting on Facebook and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. So usually when we talk to somebody, it's kind of like, here's the things we're doing. What are you interested in? And somebody finds a nice match to, you know, plug in and help out.
Well, it sounds pretty broad-reaching, and I've got to agree that there have got to be people who want to participate in this movement. And as we've talked about it, I mean, I've thought of several groups who would be interested in hearing this message, because there are all sorts of ways where citizens are trying to take their government back and regain control over what's happening and the impacts that it has on their lives. They know they can't compete at the big money level, but they do want to participate and save themselves and their future. Yeah,
absolutely. I think everybody sees corruption. What they don't see is a practical solution. Right. And so we end up being, we feel that there's this sense of helplessness that I can't do anything about this. And then when they hear about the American Anti-Corruption Act as an example, they're like, wow, this is good. It's practical, makes sense. It's, you know, nonpartisan. Right. I like this. I can support this, and you can see it happening.
Okay. And so represent.us. Right. And is there another website for the legislation specifically, or is it all listed there on the site?
Yeah, you can link to the AmericanAnticorruptionAct.org site from represent.us. Okay. So it's all there.
Great.
Including why each provision of the act is constitutionally sound, given our current Supreme Court.
That's all moving target too, though. Okay, great. You've got about 30 seconds left. Anything else you want to share or leave on people's minds?
You know, I would say it's your government. If you want it to represent you, you got to stand up and make it happen, because it's not going to happen without you.
Doesn't get any clearer than that. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Chris.
And we'll be right back after a word from our underwriter, the Conservative Forum.
The Conservative Forum of Silicon Valley began with 20 conservatives meeting at a restaurant in November of 2003. Our mission is to promote the principles of American liberty through education. By 2012, we had grown to over 600 paid members. Our monthly meetings feature well-known and prestigious conservative speakers addressing issues that are critical to our country's very survival. This includes speakers like Victor Davis Hanson, Andrew Breitbart, David Horowitz, and many others. In addition to our monthly meetings, we sponsor a conservative local cable access TV show, The Right Side, covering today's topics. Our Constitution discussion group not only teaches the Constitution, but started our annual essay contest that awards 2 $1,000 scholarships to local high school seniors. We are a virtual clearinghouse for grassroots organizations by providing them with table space at no charge in our exhibit area. There are typically a dozen groups represented. If you are like-minded, join us at our next meeting and become motivated and empowered. Liberty, made in America.
And welcome back to the right side. That was a word from our underwriter, the Conservative Forum. And we appreciate them tremendously because they make this show possible. But what they're really famous for is their speaker series. And that usually occurs at the IFES Portuguese Hall here in Mountain View, about 3 minutes away at 432 Steerland Road in Mountain View. And this evening, if you were to join them there, you would see Greg Lukianoff from FIRE talking about unlearning liberty and freedom of speech, which ties right into the show tonight with Michael. But in upcoming sessions, you'll see Dr. Bert Folsom from Hillsdale. In May, Joe Arpaio will be speaking at the forum. And in June, Nani Darwish, founder of Arabs for Israel. You can learn more at theconservativeforum.com about upcoming events and the schedule. And if you can definitely check in there if there's anything that I might have missed or if you have more interest. But in closing tonight, Michael brings up a very important point, and that is that getting the corruption out of government is something we can all relate to. As he said, it's not a right issue or a left issue. It's a right and a wrong issue. And it's wrong that money is allowed to really exude the power that it does in Washington, but also at the state and local levels. So do your part, learn about what's available to you in the realm of tools, legislation, and colleagues that are willing to go shoulder to shoulder with you to go fight this battle. I've been your host this evening on the right side. I'm Chris Pareja, and I'll look forward to seeing you again sometime in person or on the show. Thanks again. Have a great night.